Welcome to Badger Talks Quick Picks, which brings exciting happenings, resources, and talent from your UW flagship campus to the people of Wisconsin and beyond, demonstrating the power of the Wisconsin idea, one connection at a time.
Hi everyone, welcome to Badger Talks. I am Missy and I'm here today to talk about microplastics in our yards. Microplastics, for those of you who don't know, are small pieces of plastic. They're identified as being 5 millimeters or less. So 5 millimeters is about the size of a pencil eraser. And in our talk today, we're going to be talking about the less, because microplastics are impacting our human health, the health of our pets, and the health of our plants. So we're going to really want to focus on in our 3 days of summer that we have here in Wisconsin are the areas that we are most exposed to microplastics in our yards. So I have a colleague that uses a project for a class to have her students take pictures of every time they touch a plastic throughout their day. That ends up with a lot of pictures of plastic, including from our phones, which are plastic. So we're going to really focus on the areas in our yards, because those are the areas that we get to enjoy our family and friends, do things like gardening. And as I'm going to be talking through, we'll talk about how microplastics get into our lawns and our yards, what the exposure is for us, and what does that mean for our health. And then we're going to end up with a little bit of how we can prevent adding more microplastics and some ways that we can mitigate our exposure in the areas that are closest to us, our yards. So let's start out with gardening, because as I was thinking about our microplastic exposure, I was actually out in the garden and I realized that my gloves have microplastics, my plants come housed in little plastic containers, and even my yard tools have plastic handles. So as I'm thinking through what are my exposures in my yard, these were some of the first things that occurred to me. Well, and you may think about other things while you're gardening, but now you'll probably be thinking about microplastics. So the little plastic dots on my gloves are plastic fibers, the little nylon straps. Even though the glove itself is a cotton fiber, no microplastics, yay. We add plastics to just about everything we do in the world. And plastics have really been around for a very short time in human history, about 70 years or less. So if you think about 1950, we'll say zero plastics then, not quite accurate, but close for our demonstration purposes. To now, we produce over 400 million metric tons of plastic globally a year. That's a year of production. And it is anticipated that we're only going to be producing more plastics in our future. So what are the implications of that? Well, microplastics, as I alluded to, end up in our bodies. In a recent research study that came out in March from the University of New Mexico, found that we have plastics in our brain to the equivalent of about a plastic spoon or a plastic cap. And it bioaccumulates. Plastics get into us and they stay in us. And we know that those have health impacts. They have health impacts on our endocrine system, so that's our hormone regulation. They can end up in our lungs and affect oxidization. And much like plants, right? Plants ingest and absorb microplastics too. So in your garden, if you have lettuce, cucumbers, onions, tomatoes, you will find there are microplastics in the food that we eat, even the wholesome food that we're growing in our backyard. So what are some of the other ways that microplastics end up in our yards? And the bad news is they are there. There's almost nothing you can do to get rid of them. The focus of our talk today is how we can minimize or prevent bringing in more. So one of the simple things that we may think about, or I did when it came out to get my yard tools out, was our string trimmers. So the string degrades over time, right? As we're using some of the tools that we use to maintain our lawns, we end up replacing the plastic string because we're actually shredding it and spreading that all over throughout our lawns, right? So simple considerations as you're doing your walkthrough of your lawn and thinking about different areas that we can mitigate plastics. Another area is actually the clothes we wear. So I mentioned that our gloves have microfiber or microplastics. Our clothes do as well. I mean, unless you're wearing 100% cotton, 100% linen or hemp, we have synthetic fibers in our clothes. And they shed as we walk, but we also wash and dry them. So if you use these little things, which I no longer use, I use this for demonstration purposes only. This is a plastic laundry pod and it's encased in plastic. When you put this in your washer, it degrades and creates microplastics, which then get sent out into your septic system if you're rural, or into your urban sewer system if you're in the city. And then, of course, we love to dry our clothes, and we use dryer sheets, possibly. I just inhaled a bunch of microfibers. But you can get that spring spell without this by hanging your clothes. The implications of where we put our dryer vents are also a medium for spewing microplastics out into our yard. So think really carefully about where your dryer vent is. Is it venting to your garden? Is it venting to your child's sandbox? Are there ways that you can create a vegetative screen around your dryer vent to kind of capture and hold those microparticles so they're not so prevalent throughout your yard? And if your dog is watching right now, I'm going to be talking about BALLSs. The microplastics in our bodies have different impacts on the systems that we're in. So as I mentioned earlier, endocrine disruptors, right? These mess with our hormones, these plastics. And if your dog is like my dog, they shred toys. So I have a lot of those naked tennis balls laying around because all the fuzz is off. But almost any plastic toy, you can see that there are fibrous. They get ingested. They get distributed throughout your yard. So your dogs, your kids are probably swallowing and inhaling microplastics, despite our need to keep them entertained and play with them. So those are some of the ways that we, just through our everyday activities, add microplastics to our yard. One of the ways we also probably don't think about very often is the impact of our adjacency to roads and driveways. So our tires don't stay full tires all the time. We have to change out our tires because they degrade over time. That degradation releases microplastics into our roadways. So, and then other cars go by and aerosolize those microplastics. So the areas most adjacent to our streets and our driveway have a higher concentration of microplastics. They're evident in the trees along the streets, and there are ways that we can mitigate that through lawn care practices. So allowing a more natural lawn, putting trees or bushes along the street also helps to capture and mitigate them. So those are just some of the immediate ways that you can think about how microplastics get in your lawn. And let's think about barbecue season, right? So one of the ways that we like to use our lawns and our yards is to invite people over or to go to other people's houses and enjoy our outdoor spaces. So your lawn furniture, you're pulling the cover off of your grill, you're pulling the cover off of your boat, you're hosing that down in your lawn. That water runoff is directly taking those microfibers from those covers, from that furniture, and pushing them into your lawn. So think about ways that you can clean or wash your covers separately, or look to other fibers like canvas that is not a microplastic as a way to cover your furniture. Because I want to be out there enjoying our stuff. And you can have wood or metal furniture, but you probably still want something a little squishy for your bottom when you're sitting out there enjoying beverages with your family. So another just simple way to do it, take your cushions, your covers, put them inside so that they are away from the weather and the weatherization that further diminishes the integrity of those fabrics. Some very simple things. Like I said, we're not going to be able to eliminate microplastics. They are everywhere. The intention is to limit our exposure to them as much as humanly possible. So what are some of the ways that we can do that? So we can prevent bringing microplastics into our yard. Maybe instead of getting our dogs toys, we use sticks. I realize there's issues with sticks, but the point is natural toys. What are natural toys? Since plastics have really only been around 70 years, this is a new conundrum, a new way of living for us. So maybe we talk to our grandparents or great-grandparents and say, what did you play with? How were your barbecues and your outdoor outings before plastics? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have lived a long time as humanity without plastics, and we can do that again. So prevention is a key. Some of the simple things to do in your yard. So as you're planting your gardens, a lot of times we tend to want to use synthetic barriers, plastic barriers, the synthetic fibers, to put those down, put some soil on top to prevent regrowth. Another more natural way to do that would be to bring in heavier amounts of mulch. Right? You want deep mulch because one of the things that we want to do is to improve our soil health. If we have healthy soils and we are able to grow really strong root systems to hold and bind the microplastics so they're not migrating through the soils and reaching us in different methods of exposure. Another way that we can think about gardening is to create some of those natural barriers, as I mentioned, along streets and along driveways, near our dryer vents, to try to mitigate their movement through the wind. So microplastics are 5 millimeters or less, but there's a good chance you probably have had plastic bags flowing through your yard or some other litter that gets dispersed throughout our communities. So ways to capture that so it's not exacerbating some of the microplastic concerns that we have. And then as far as mitigation and reduction, we can also do bioswales or rain gardens to try to capture some of that runoff and once again hold the microplastics in place as they come into the yard. So there's a lot that we can do. A lot of it is individual choice and action. Host a plastic-free barbecue or event in your backyard and have other people come up with their ideas. Like, how did they reduce plastic? How did they use a glass container instead of a Tupperware with a plastic film? There are a lot of ways that we can mitigate the amount of plastic that we use through just a little bit of thought and awareness. So Anna, we've created a kind of a backyard check sheet for you, a checkoff list that you can go through and identify some ways that you can take further action to mitigate microplastic use in your lives and to improve your own health through mitigating microplastic ingestion or inhalation. And we hope that you have just a super lovely summer. If you have any ideas that you'd like to share about ways you can reduce microplastic in your lives, I'd love to hear about it. I'm at nergard@wisc.edu. Thank you so much and enjoy your summer.